Welcome to Leaders Gotta Lead. Join our leaders and hosts, Dan Gomer and Scott Harshman, as they bring you powerful strategies and insights to help you lead with purpose, impact, and unstoppable success.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Leaders Gotta Lead podcast. This is a podcast where we just bring in all sorts of different types of leaders to talk about what it means to them to be a great leader, because at the end of the day, there's not one good answer. It depends, all right? My favorite answer, it depends. So we get people on here. We talk a little bit about what that looks like for them, because we also believe that, we all are leaders in some way, shape, or form, some facet of our life. If nothing else, we're leading ourselves. And so we just want to get out there and share more stories about how we can lead. And our hope is that the people that are watching this podcast will look at or take some of the feedback that we have in these podcasts, some of the information that we put out in these podcasts, and find ways to apply it in their own lives so that they can become the best version of themselves, the best leader that they can be. And so today, we have an amazing guest on the show, my friend Dan Fortune. Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. This is going to be a really good one. Dan's got a really good background in the military. He runs a real estate team. He now has started another company called Dual. We'll talk more about that. But, one of the things, and we've had quite a few professional athletes. We've had a lot of military.
That's not me.
Well, that's all right. We've also had lots of military people.
Frisbee is a professional sport, okay?
That's right. Ultimate Frisbee.
Ultimate Frisbee.
Yeah. You're going to bring a wealth of knowledge, serving in the military for 11 years, essentially, flying satellites, which is super cool. Like I said, now you run a team of 50 agents. You've got this dual program that is just, growing like wildfire. And I think it really speaks to your ability to lead people, your ability to connect with people. And so really excited to dive in deep with you today and learn some of your lessons. Also a father of two. I know you love having kids, and every time we talk, you're always just beaming when you talk about your kids. And so we can talk a little bit about that as well. So once again, Dan, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. Cool. So we always like to start off every episode with one, I don't know, simple, maybe it's not a simple question, but we always ask the same question. What does it mean to be a great leader to you?
Yeah, I'm going to default pretty easy. Like, I think servant leadership is a big thing to me. Yeah, I think at the Air Force Academy, they kind of ingrained that in us. Growing up, I grew up in a pretty religious family, and that was kind of the context of like a Judeo-Christian upbringing, was kind of servant leadership, if you will. And then I think as being a parent and a spouse, you find like a lot of times like people get mixed up that leadership is this person that's, big and famous and all this stuff. But I've found that like the best leaders that I've had as mentors, and some even like Good to Great, they talk a lot about that. It isn't necessarily the big, huge personality and stuff like that. It's people that understand what it's like to like be in the trenches and then to lead from that position. So what is it? Leaders Eat Last. I think like there's all these books that talk about it, but it's not like in the common dialogue. Like that's not what you see like from a media perspective. But I think when you dig into companies and organizations and families and all those type of things, that's what you find. So I think a great leader tends to be a servant leader.
So when you look at your leadership style, so servant leadership is a style of leadership, but when things get tough, right? You got your team of 50 or whatever, and something happens and it's annoying or frustrating or difficult or whatever. What do you fall back on, right? Like I'm trying to kind of make that connection between servant leadership and at the same time being a driver, right? Being a leader, being the one that's in front, but at the same time, you're serving other people. Like, how do you balance those two pieces?
Like, I mean, for me, again, like obviously there's different styles. I don't feel like being the person big and in front is always necessary. I think sometimes it is, like when chaos, I've been in some like chaotic type of, I'll give you an example. Somebody broke into my house with my wife and I there, and came after us. at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was a great opportunity for me to be a leader, right? Because I'm the bigger of the two between my wife and I. So when he broke our door down and came after us, like that gave me this opportunity to step into that space. Um, right? But she also performed a great function, fact that she's sitting on the phone talking to 911, trying to tell the police how to get into our building. And so, like for me, it's not always that same thing. It's not always being the big person up front, and it doesn't necessarily being this person that's, I mean, I said, you know what, leaders eat last. I don't think it is always eating last. Sometimes you get up, you eat first so you can get out the door and go do the thing that needs to be done. But it's the idea of, I think, the humility and the lack of ego, um, that really over a long-term sustainable relationship, long-term sustainable organization, all those things, I think that's where the real value comes, is like, so let's call it like egoless leadership.
Mm.
So I love the servant leadership. I think it's one of the most impactful ones. Dan and I actually talked about, multiple different types of leaders. And when I hear servant leadership, I think of Jesus, right?
Yep.
Like first and foremost, I mean, he was always looking to serve people, and make them the best that they possibly could be, so that they could then lead from the front as well. When I hear servant leadership and your explanation of it, I also hear something of lead by example. And I think is also another form of servant leadership, and having a team and a family and everything like that. How do you lead by example to where, people can follow you and find the value that you're doing for them?
I'm trying to remember the guy. So like, I think that the integrity piece, like they say, integrity is when all the pieces fit together. And so I think finding like who I am and what I'm best at and being honest about that. And then like I'm not great at everything, that's for sure. And so then finding the things that I'm not very good at and asking for help in those areas, like the authenticity of that, the integrity of that, I think again, over the long run, a lot of stuff can be accomplished in short term, right? Like you don't have to, in my opinion, be a great leader to lead an organization. Like I found that out in the Air Force. Like there were some leaders that would come in, they'd make a mess of things so that they could get their next promotion. They created programs and stuff like that that were of little or no value, but they weren't there long enough for it to play out. So they'd create something, they'd be really charismatic, then they'd get out of the door. And then the people that were stuck in the organization for 5, 10, 15 years had to deal with their mess, right? And so I think this is kind of that same idea or that same principle, that if you're creating something long-term, so family, long-term organization, something like that, that figuring out what you're really good at and doing that really well consistently, along pairing that with what you're not very good at and finding people that can do that and being honest. I think there's a book called Paradigm of the Dead Horse Rider. And in that book, it's really, really thin, but I think it's really profound. It was talking about, it's really, because I was in engineering, it was related to like you have these really great engineers, and then they would get to a certain level that then they, in order to keep making more money and move up in the organization, they had to be promoted into management and leadership. But a lot of them weren't great leaders or managers, and they didn't want to do it. What they wanted to do was be a great engineer, but they would get promoted into this next level that was beyond their capability. My father-in-law, who's a genius, is a perfect example. He's like, I love being an engineer. I didn't love leading these people, but in order to grow and move up in the organization, I had to. And so, but I think in a great organization, that person should be able to say, and you structure incentives in a way that where it's like, you don't have to manage people. You can just do what you're really good at and let somebody else do the management of the people. But that great engineer is a leader in that organization. Without their engineering expertise and prowess, that organization doesn't continue to grow and expand. So again, so to kind of summarize that, I jumped around a little bit, but for me, it's like I'm really good at these things and I'm going to get a lot better. These things are not in my wheelhouse, and it doesn't make sense for me to try and put them in my wheelhouse. It makes a lot more sense for me to just find people that can fill those gaps. Get that?
Well, I think of the book Traction. Have you ever read that book?
Mm-mm.
So Traction is a great book. It talks about like different hierarchies throughout like a corporation, for example, of like
Okay.
a visionary, an implementer, and then, having different buckets from there of marketing, sales, whatever it may be. Um, what, when did you realize, and when did you let the ego go in your leadership journey to finally just be like, you know what, I'm not great at that. I need to
Mhm.
delegate that. I need to find somebody who's better at that than me. And how did you let that go?
So that was a process for me, like probably so late 20s into early 30s. So I'll highlight a couple of things that I read in a couple books. One of them, the quote is, "If there was someone that could be comfortable in their own skin, everyone would want to be them." And I remember reading that quote. It was Donald Miller. I think it was in Blue Like Jazz. And I remember thinking, why am I so uncomfortable in my skin? Like, what is it? Like, I always, growing up, like, I wanted to be like a 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyed middle linebacker. Like, that's what I wanted to be. Right. And I am not 6'3". I'm not blonde hair, blue eyed. I'm like 5'11" on a good day. Um, and, 175 after like pounding some protein shakes. So, and I just realized some of those things I can change. Like, as another thing is like I felt awkward at dances and parties because I didn't know how to dance. So I was like, some of these things I can change. Like I can learn how to dance. So like that day I enrolled in a dance class, and now I can get down on the dance floor. And some things I can't change. Like besides putting in contacts and wearing stilts, I'm just not going to be that. And I'm never going to be a middle linebacker unless it's flag football. So like that started this journey for me of being like, okay, there are parts of me that can change, that I can improve, and there's parts of me that I have to accept because that's the way I was created, evolved, whatever we want to call it. And so that really, I would say, kind of started that journey. And then I read another book that was called The Difference Maker, and it was just like, if you're positive, you will attract people to you that's very different if you're negative. And I was raised in a fixed mindset, kind of negative home. And nothing against my family. Like I love my family, but like that was more of the mindset. Like the growth mindset wasn't a concept that we had. And so that really started shifting me towards a different way of interacting with people. And I would say those two things then really started opening that door to like the breakdown of ego, to like being excited about meeting people that were better at things than I was, that, were smarter than me, all those things. Because before that, I really pushed back. I was always trying to be the best at everything and the top person. And when I coach and stuff like that, my fixed mindset said if I wasn't the best, then I was nothing. And that was my internal dialogue. And I realized, man, like, even if I'm the best, maybe I'm the best for a day, an hour, a week, but at some point somebody else takes over. So if my fulfillment and my self-worth came from being the best, like it's going to be a rough road.
So where did that was there a moment where that changed? Like, because if we look at most people or a lot of people, they never cross that barrier to like, I just want to get better. Like I hear you saying, at some point you realized I just want to be the best version of myself.
Yeah.
So I can't dance. How do I become better at dancing? I can't, sell this. How can I get better at selling that? I can't do this. How can I get better at doing that? Right. So that's a choice. And some people choose to play the victim. Some people choose to kind of take on these heavy things. Like, was there a moment where something clicked for you, where you were just like, you know what, like I think there's more to this?
Well, like the reading the book and realizing that I had the opportunity to be comfortable in my own skin. I mean, that was life changing for me. I remember like the day after reading that quote, if someone
Mm.
was comfortable in their own skin, everyone would want to be them. I remember walking into the Air Force Base, and it was me and two other guys, very good looking guys, both taller than me, both buffer than me, all those things. And we're walking in to the base, and there were these glass doors that were reflective. And as we're walking in, normally I would have been looking at myself in those doors. Like, how do I look? How am I coming across? All those things. But I was having this mindset shift. And I remember looking at their reflections and watching them looking at themselves, doing a self-assessment. And it was like this light bulb came on for me.
Mm.
And it was like, oh my gosh, everybody's trying to get comfortable in their own skin. And it was like, it was just, like, I will never forget it. It was such a profound moment for me because these are like really successful, good looking, like great, smart guys. And they're just normal human beings. Right.
Yeah.
And so that just started this mental shift of like, again, like you said, like just looking to be the best version of myself, accepting some of those things that aren't ever going to change. Right. That's just me. That's how I'm made. And some of those things like, man, if that's important to me and I think that will make me a better version of myself, then how do I dig into that?
Yeah. Well, and what I hear is curiosity. I mean, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear is if we want to be a better leader, then really we have to go inward and we have to get curious. Like it's almost a requirement, you know?
I mean,
Because-
yeah. So, I do life coaching with like C-level folks. Normally it starts with some sort of business. I'm helping doing some consulting. And then, so this is like small and mid-sized businesses. And I will tell you to a T, the issues that are in that business always stem from the leader, especially in the really like, between 20 and let's say 150 employees. Like the issues within that, and that's why it always inevitably always goes from consulting into life coaching with them because the issues that they're running into their business are what's inside here. And it's the outflowing of who they are, who we are, right? So the issues within your company, within your family, within your friendships, most of them are your issues. The ones in my family, my businesses, they're really my issues. It's a great way to figure out where somebody's issue are is look at their family and their businesses.
So something I think is really interesting, and I love what you're saying about this, right? Like be comfortable in your own skin. And I think in today's society, right, you have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X or Twitter or Twitter or Snapchat and TalkTick and all this crap, right? Um, Everybody is worried about their self-image. And then I start looking at it because I have 4 young kids,
Mm.
one being a teenage daughter, that I start seeing that as well. What are you doing, and what advice would you give somebody to lead themselves down this path of being comfortable in their own skin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process. So the first is to like even understand that this is something that we all deal with, right? I mean, even a narcissist, I'm reading a book on narcissism right now that a friend of mine's married to a narcissist, and it just kind of came out through some brain mapping and stuff like that. And the person's an amazing human being, but they fall under the narcissist diagnosis. And so everybody is kind of looking for, am I okay? How do I fit into society? Like, who am I? Those type of things, right? And so I think the first part is just like realizing that you and I are doing that. I didn't even realize I was doing that. I mean, I was 25 years old before I realized, I mean, again, walking and looking at my reflection, I had this like aha moment, like, oh my gosh, we're all doing this. And maybe it's because I'm a late bloomer, but the veil wasn't really removed to that reality for me until walking and seeing those reflections. It just became very evident. Um, so I think the first is like just realizing that we have a problem, right? Or it's a challenge of being a human being, is wanting to fit in, wanting to be understood, those things. And then after that, I think that the big work is figuring out what does the best version of ourselves look like? Because the best version of yourself will look very different than the best version of myself. And so if I'm looking at you, Scott, and I'm like, okay, he's making this money, or he has this great marriage, or he's really good at soccer, or whatever it is, like, and I'm always trying to be that, but deep down, that's not even really who I want to be. It's more of just trying to compete with you and be like you. And I think that does us a disservice. The hard work is really figuring out, like, what does the best version of myself look like? Like Dan, you said being curious. Like I picked up drums 2 days ago for the first time. Like, I could play a little bit piano, I could play a little bit guitar. I've never played the drums, but I'm not great at either of those instruments. My daughter is kind of interested in drums, so I'm like, why not? And I'm loving it. 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been a version of myself that I would have tried on, but now it's like a version that I'm trying on. So that's the challenging. And I think the beautiful part is that it evolves. Like the best version of you, Scott, like 2 years ago, like that person might need to shed whatever it was. Maybe you loved, scotch 2 years ago, but now you're a bourbon guy. And that's just you're evolving and changing. It's not that being the scotch guy was bad. It's just that's not who you are anymore. Getting stuck in a version of ourselves, I also think then is what gets challenging, especially as we get older,
Mm.
because we want to be safe.
Something I saw at church one day, and this kind of goes into the same topic, is there's a study out there that like 78% of the time people are only thinking about themselves.
Mhm.
So if you break it down into a day, right? You sleep for 8, 9, 10 hours, depending on who you are. If you're, multiple people like myself, I probably had 4 to 6 hours of sleep last night. But you think so much about yourself. Does it really give you enough time to think about other people? So one thing that has helped me in this avenue is, hey, if they're always thinking about themselves that much, that means they only have 22% to worry about me. And
Mhm.
I'm not even talking about their spouse, their kids, their other stuff that they have going on, or their family, friends, whatever it is. I mean, just let it go. Like, just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. People are afraid of videos, right? Shooting videos and posting them online because they're worried of what people are going to say. Who cares? Just do it. So
Yeah.
I think this is a very interesting topic, especially around leading yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Well,
starts there.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say it's an interesting dichotomy between, you know, Ed Milet was just talking about this on his podcast the other day. He was talking about how this idea of like, you're good just how you are. And I say the same thing, like, you're good just how you are. Yeah, but you know what I mean? And he's like, everybody's like, oh, you're good just exactly how you are. Like, don't you want to grow? Don't you want to get better? Don't you want to be the best version of yourself? And go do that work. And so there's kind of a balance or something between you know, being comfortable in your own skin and being like, I'm okay with who I am. And
Well,
at the same time,
yeah.
it's not good enough. Like I can be better. So like I'm happy with where I'm at. I've made a lot of progress. You recognize that. You're authentic. I heard you say before. You're honest with yourself and you find ways to constantly improve. And if you do that, I almost feel like people are just naturally going to follow you. They're going to be like, what's that person doing? Like I want to be more like that. That person's comfortable in the skin, kind of like what you were saying.
Well, I mean, if we're not, I think it was, what was it? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was one of those series in there. And he was talking about like, he's like, I never want to get stuck in like in the old music that I used to listen to, the same clothes that I used to wear, the same conversations and stories that I've always told. He said, because if I do that, then I cease to become relevant.
That's
Right?
good.
Because the rest of the world is changing and evolving. So if I'm not listening to new music, if I'm not changing my style up, like evolving, if I'm not listening, having new stories or watching podcasts or movies or listening, if I'm not changing and evolving, then the people that I'm around have already seen me, heard me. There's nothing new to me, right? So I become irrelevant. And so that's, I think, part of the process is like wanting to stay relevant, like for our spouse. Like my wife and I, her name is Rachel. Like Rachel and I have this conversation. Like, I never want to be boring to you. I don't want you to have to keep listening to the same stories about what I did in high school and college. Like, who wants to listen to that, right? Or the same stories of what we did 2 years ago. Like, let's keep evolving and changing, reading, learning new things, becoming better versions of ourselves so that we're bringing that to the table in our relationship. And so that's one thing that really drives us and like that I find is so sexy in her. Oh man, is that like I'm getting to know this new person. Like I've officiated, I've been the officiant, whatever the term is, in a handful of weddings. And one of the things I say when I'm marrying couples, I'm like, it's interesting that we're standing here and you're committing to each other, but understand like if you do this well, you're not just committing to the person that you're standing in front of, you're committing to whoever they're going to become over the course of your marriage together and supporting that person through that evolution. Like, I think if we all were honest with ourselves and we really believed what I said, no one would get married because it'd be so terrifying, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea
Yeah.
who you're actually going to become, but
Yeah.
I'm signing up to love that person and help that person become the best version of themselves. Like that's wild.
And then Dan, how many times have they just been like, you know what?
I'm out of here.
Let's go eat some
Actually,
cake.
like
I'm good.
only
How many
one,
how
only
many weddings did you finalize? Let's put it that way.
yeah. So I think I've officiated 9 and only one is split. So that's pretty decent. Right.
Oh.
And that obviously has nothing to do with me, but
Right.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's a very interesting perspective because you go through the vows, right? Like, till death do us part is how that ends.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 100% right. People change, people evolve, people, get pushed in different directions, and then also like chaos happens.
Hmm.
So now you're trying to deal with the chaos and how that person deals with that chaos.
Yeah.
Having kids is not easy. Being married is not easy. Living with somebody is not easy, right? Like there's a lot of this stuff that I think is pretty interesting. And I think that's why our divorce rate is so high, is because people don't want to continue to grow and evolve in their relationship.
Yeah, they said that like one of the partners normally wants to keep things how they are, and the other partner wants to keep changing and grow. It's pretty common, and it creates that stress because one of them looks at the other one and is like, "This isn't what I signed up for." Like, I didn't want to do dance lessons, and now you want to do dance lessons, right? And the other one is their thought process is, I don't want to be the same that we were. And I'm not even saying one is right versus the other necessarily. Obviously, you know what I prefer. Kind of mine is the growth and evolution, but yeah, and there's that tension there of keeping things the way they are and not keeping the things the way they are. Like you said.
What do you think stops most leaders from adopting that mindset of growth and evolution?
Well, one, I think is fatigue. Like it's hard to continue to grow and evolve, especially if you've got a lot of weight on you. Like, if your family life is difficult, I mean, just think about how much free time you used to have in your 20s. I mean, I don't know when you guys got married. I didn't get married till my 30s, but think about how much we'll call it discretionary time. You could spend however you wanted, right? If you wanted to spend it playing video games, you could spend it playing video games. If you wanted to spend it studying a new language, you could do that. It was discretionary. Now, how much do you have of that? Like
Not much. Yeah.
very, very small, right? And
Eight
so
minutes
I
a day.
think, what's that?
8 minutes a day.
Yeah,
Scott,
exactly.
Scott also has 4 kids. You
I
got it
know,
right
well,
this time, Scott.
that's
You
right,
were
right.
right.
And so because you don't have that, you're like your threshold where you're just feeling this weight of being busy.
Hey guys, Dan Gomer here with the Leaders Gotta Lead podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you are enjoying the content, and if you are, I've got great news because there's more where that came from. Just click on the link in the show notes to discover new ways to plug into what we're doing, to find new content that we're putting out, and to discover how we might be able to work together to elevate your leadership game. Just click on the link in the show notes and let's take our leadership success to the next level.
And always providing solutions and that type of stuff, I think makes it very difficult for people to evolve. That's why I love stuff like when they're saying like take breaks, like take vacations, have time for just yourself, that self-care and things like that. And it's not being lazy. Like what do they say? Busy is the new stupid, I think is what Gates said. And like that didn't make sense to me because I was in that like work ethic type of thing and always be busy and always be working and you can sleep when you die. And then I realized, wow, that's a really terrible long-term strategy for my life. So, every Friday, like this afternoon, I have my own free time for 3 hours. And I do in that three, I block it off and I do whatever I want to do. If that's listening to a book, if that's sitting in the sauna, if that's, having fun with my wife, whatever those things are, like I've actually blocked time into my schedule for that to relax, to refresh, to have a good time. And then, Dan, I do Wednesdays with the Queen, which is where I take the day off to be with my wife.
Yeah.
So I think that if you do those things, it creates margin for you to evolve and become your best self because you can spend some time thinking about what that looks like, and having conversations with your friends and family and your coworkers and the people at work. Like, what can we do to be better here? If you're not stopping and slowing down, you're just in the grind, you never do that. So
I think that's interesting with our industry, and I talk a lot about this is the COVID fatigue, right? Like during like the COVID days, I hate to bring up the C word, but oh yeah, by the way, happy 5-year anniversary a couple days ago.
oh,
But it's interesting, like during 2020, 21, in the first, let's say quarter, half a year of 22, it was go, 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 go. Like
mhm.
you're working until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, your phone's constantly ringing. And then rates started going up. And then here comes the excuses. It's the market. It's the interest rate. Nobody wants to buy a house. Nobody wants to refi a house. It's excuse after excuse after excuse. And we're even seeing it now with all these changes in the mortgage world, right? Like
Mhm.
FHA and the grant programs and things like that. Everyone's like, the sky's falling, and it's not true. Like the sky really is not falling. But I
Mhm.
think leaders, you mentioned this earlier, and I want to pick your brain on it, is when chaos arises, how do you handle chaos from all the noise that's going on, right? The media, they talk about if it bleeds, it reads, I think is a
If it
term they
Yeah.
bleeds, it
use.
leads.
What's that?
If it bleeds, it leads.
There you go. If it bleeds, it leads. So like, how do you handle chaos from a leadership standpoint, to make sure that whatever chaos comes up, whether it's with your spouse, your kids, your employment, how do you handle the chaos, and what do you do from a leadership's perspective?
So the first part to me is put first things first. And so for me, like I know if I have a really important meeting for work, if my kid wants me to go and see their soccer game and my wife wants a date, I go on the date. I know that like first thing first for me is my relationship. And I want to be very careful for the listeners. I'm not saying that needs to be anyone else's priorities. That's the fun and the challenge of this is everybody gets to figure out their own. This is about being the version of my best self. For me, my priorities are my wife, my children, my work, and then everything else kind of falls underneath that for me. And so if you know what those priorities are, that makes the chaos in my mind very much less chaotic because now I'm not looking at trying to make a decision between 12 things. Like I already know what the priorities look like. And so very few times am I going to move those priorities around. Now it might happen like I call Rachel and I'm like, hey, like somebody wants to have this meeting. I would be late to this or not show up for this. What does that look like? And we have a conversation, but very rarely does that need to take place. So by putting first things first, I just know what the priorities are and how they land. And then within those priorities, I look at what's the chaos that's happening in there. I forget who the gentleman was, but he was saying one of the things that's great about Elon is every week he sits down, looks at the number one problem in each of his businesses and tackles that. He said by the end of the year, he's tackled the 52 biggest problems in each of his companies. And then he said, and this is where like I think the servant leadership kind of comes in. He's like, but before he's able to do that, he's studied in depthly every aspect of that company and he knows it inside and out. That to me is the servant part, right? So he's lowering himself to understand how everything works, the complications and the time that takes, right? And then now he's actually able to lead because he's answering these questions. And whether you like him or not, like the ability to lead multiple companies successfully is very challenging. Very few people have been able to do it. You know, so that principle, I think, flows over into what we're talking here. So I think I deal with less chaos in my life and in my businesses and in my family because I've very clearly prioritized what's important to me. And so, like, my wife doesn't have to wonder if she comes first or if my kids are important to me. My business colleagues know that I won't be available on Wednesday. So if there's stuff going wrong at the office on Wednesday, unless literally somebody is dying, they're probably not reaching out to me. And if they do, I'm not picking up. Right. So that's a perfect example of alleviating that stress there where it could be kind of chaotic. Um,
So
Well, and I think too, it's interesting there because ironically, maybe it's not ironic, but it's a bold statement to say that if I got to choose between going to my kid's game or hanging out with my wife, I'm going to hang out with my wife. In our society, that's a bold statement. You know what I mean? Because youth sports, and we won't go down this rabbit hole. Scott and I have in the past.
yeah.
Won't go down this rabbit
I want to
hole.
learn from you though, because I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old. Y'all
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting, right? Because in our society, a lot of people put that first, like sports rules all, and then everything kind of falls behind that. So it's a bold statement, but the reason that I bring that up is because what sticks out to me is that if we want to have standards and if we want to be able to prioritize our life, it means that we have to be bold. It means that we have to like look at the social norms and the assumptions that we have and look at ourselves authentically and say, okay, well, how much do I want to plug into that? And for you, you're like, no, what's most important is my wife. And for somebody else, it's going to be totally different.
yeah.
But we're just kind of making assumptions. then we can't ever get clear on what's going on. And we have to be bold and stand out beyond social norms and stuff like that. If we're going to lead, we have to be different.
Yeah, I think it's really figuring out again, like what really matters to me. And like, Steve Jobs is a perfect example. Like being a husband and a father was not important to him. Like if you read, like it wasn't. I mean, he denied he even had his daughter for the first 15 years of her life or something like that. And he said he wanted to make a dent in the universe with technology. And so like that, and there's no doubt, I mean, a lot of what we're doing, I'm on
He's
a
done it.
Mac right now, right? I got an iPhone sitting here. So he did it. Now, it'd have been interesting to see what he would have said if he had lived to 90. He passed away, unfortunately, earlier, so we didn't get an assessment of his overall life. But he was pretty clear, I think, on what his goals and objectives were, and then he went after that. And that's, I think, the hard part is being really honest. When I life coach, I said, like, look, there's no judgment from me on what your principles, what your priorities are, how you structure your life. I'm here to help you do that to the best of your ability and then succeed in that thing. Right. And so, but I think most people, they never really want to be honest with themselves with things like money is really important to me. Driving a nice car is really important to me. Like, I would rather make more money than go to my kids' games. Like, they don't want to say that because, like you said, Dan, it's socially not acceptable, but you are who you are. And so you either change that and you move money down and your kids' games up, or you accept that, you explain that to your children, and you say, look, I want to be able to have this money, this security, go on these vacations. I'm going to make it to 2 of your games. Is that okay? And you have a conversation around that,
Hmm.
right? But we're not willing to do it because we haven't done the work inside ourselves to be honest, because it's scary. I mean, like you just said it, like some people are like, Dan, I don't know if I like that when I say, like, it's more important to me to spend time with my wife than it is for me to spend time with my kids, right? Like if I have to make the decision, because the way we've built our family is if Rachel and I are solid, then we feel like we're much better parents for us, right? And so, like socially, that's not necessarily very acceptable. We have people that, we have a sitter that will come and watch our kids overnight, and Rachel and I will be on a date just downtown. Like we're not even that far away. But for us, we know that time together away from our kids is super valuable. Then when we get back, we both said, like, we think we're really good parents in like 2 or 3 hour increments. I'm not a great parent for 3 days in a row. So, right. I know that's my shortcoming. And I love
Yeah.
when I see dads and moms that like can just crush it day after day after day, but I'm just not good at it.
You guys are talking about this, and something that goes through my head, and it's a strategy that you could definitely take is there's a YouTube video of a professor talking about big rock, small rock, sand.
Okay.
And a strategy that I've personally done, and it does work. It's not going to work for everyone, but it is something that you can definitely do, is take your day-to-day inventory of what you have to get done on a day-to-day basis,
Hmm.
weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, right? Put it all onto a sheet of paper and then start figuring out what are the big rocks. And if you're trying to build a calendar, I know calendars are not sexy, but if you're trying to build a calendar to figure out how do I fit all this in, the first thing that has to happen is big rocks. And I
Hmm.
can almost guarantee, and Dan, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but if you put the big rock, your big rock is your wife, that's why you have Queen Wednesdays.
Yeah.
You put
Oh
it
yeah.
in there, you know that there's no way that that's going to get interrupted unless somebody's dying, like you said. So it's a strategy that you could definitely take if anybody's listening to this and they're trying to figure out, like, how do I do this? That's one that's worked for me. How did you do it for yourself? And Dan,
I
Gomer,
Yeah,
how did you
something
do it
very
for
similar,
yourself?
Scott. I use something that's called the daily top five. And so like I have my like top 5 things that I've got to get done every day. And then they say like, eat the alligator first or like take on the hardest thing first and do it in the morning. Because it's like lifting weights, right? Your first set, your first rep is much easier than your third set, ninth rep. And so I prescribe to that. Like some people they can't do that until they had their coffee and 10:30 their brain's working. I tend to work pretty well when I first wake up. So again, figuring out who you are and how you operate. But that for me is, and I just look at my top 5 and that's what I do. That's what I focus on. And if something else comes in that's higher priority, then I move my top 5. But I weigh that all the time. Is this more important? What they say, important, not urgent. Like a lot of people pick up their phone when it's ringing, but that phone call isn't important at all. It just feels urgent. And so they pick it up, but they're stepping over all the important things that they have going on in their day. So
That's a good analogy, especially with emails in today's society.
There's a lot of distractions. Yeah. Well, all right. So just for time's sake, I'm going to recap a little bit of where we were, and then we've still got a little bit more to go here. But just to kind of recap what we've covered. I mean, man, we've covered a lot, and I love, I think one of my biggest takeaways is the correlation between personal growth and development and being able to lead, especially if you're going to be a servant type leadership or servant type leader. How important it is to be genuine and authentic within ourselves, be honest with ourselves so that we can, number one, accept who we are while at the same time understanding that there's room for growth and improvement, and being okay with that dichotomy. And, those were kind of my biggest takeaways. Scott, I don't know what your biggest takeaway was, but.
I mean, I think I'm a big proponent of this, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but leading yourself and really taking inventory and really taking the time to, Dan gave a great suggestion of your daily top fives. And the book that I reference is Eat the Frog.
yeah,
They're smaller alligators. But Eat the Frog, do the hard stuff first. Get that done as soon as possible. So I love that, and I think that's a huge takeaway that people should definitely take from this. And then the other piece that I thought was really interesting is ego, right? Like, be comfortable in your own skin and let your ego go. Like, just let it go. I think those are some really big takeaways that I have.
Or at least become cognizant of the ego, right? And one of these things, one quote that you had that I thought was really good was authenticity allows us to ask for help, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. Like, if we're authentic, it means we're honest, like genuinely looking inward. And if we do that, we can find our shortcomings. And when we know what our shortcomings are, we can then ask for help, right? I think a lot of leaders think that they have to do it alone. And the reality is they don't.
or do it all, right? Like
Yeah.
some of the things that are our shortcomings we want to work at and get better. Some of them I think we want to ignore and push off because we can't do all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the things that, like, I'm going to admit that I'm not good at that, and it's not something I'm going to work on. Like,
Yeah.
it is not going to be a priority for me because working on that doesn't move the organization or the family or it doesn't move us up. It just takes my time and it gets me better at something. So I can feel better that I don't have a shortcoming, but it doesn't really move us up. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about curiosity, right? Being curious about yourself, being curious about playing the guitar or the drums, I should say, or, whatever it is. I want to learn to dance. I'm going to dance.
Yeah.
And just being curious and kind of having that joy of like experimentation in life. And then finding the best version of you. I think that's what we talked a lot about is like, okay, cool. Like you're cool, but what's the best version of you look like? Like, how can you get just a little bit closer to that, and having all of these micro adjustments over a long period of time, your life just gets better and better and better.
I think it's worth mentioning here. Some personalities, I think, have a hard time looking at themselves and realizing that there's the room for improvement. I just want to make sure I highlight this. It's not self-loathing. I'm not self-loathing over the fact that I have these shortcomings and this and that. Like, we all have them. That's the human condition. None of us are going to be perfect. So it's the acceptance, I guess, like the looking in the mirror, like being honest with ourselves, the authenticity of that, and like, okay, these are worth improving on, these I'm accepting, and these I'm really good at, and I can be, excited about the areas that I'm either naturally gifted in or that I've worked really hard to get good at. So it's not self-loathing.
Right.
It's more just like, again, that growth mindset and opportunity to look at becoming a better human being.
It's actually a form of self-love.
I like that. Yeah.
When we look at it, like think about our kids and they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, or we want them to be better. And we're like, hey, we're like shaking them like, hello, wake up. You should do this thing better over here. Right. That's an act of love.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to be better. We're trying to help. And so it's the same thing for us. It doesn't help to sit in doldrums and, oh, woo, it's mean, loathe where you're at. It's an act of self-love to be like, you're doing fine, but you can do better. And and so sometimes I think it's hard to switch that mindset around. I know I've struggled with that in my life in the past, but it is possible. Um, the other thing too that I really admire about you, Dan, I haven't figured out how to quite do it yet, but you talked a lot about adding free time to your schedule, doing the Wednesday, date days, and taking that time to be with your wife. That's so great that you've been able to set up that intention and actually make it happen. But it's just a great example of like what's possible when we lead. Like you run a lot of businesses, you do a lot of stuff, and yet you still find time to do that. I think that's it's remarkable, really. And I'm a
But
little jealous.
there's an interesting
Little
piece to
jelly.
that. Yeah, yeah. Well, the question is, what do I have to, like, everything is trade-offs, right? So then the question is, what is the trade-off? The
Hmm.
trade-off for me is more money. Like, I would make more money. I would have more bigger company, whatever the ideas are, if I didn't take Wednesdays off. And then the question is that trade worth it? And I've made the decision that the trade is not worth it. My life is much better because of my Wednesdays with the Queen than if it wasn't. Now, I'm not saying it isn't hard. There are days where I'm kind of twitching, like,
Yeah.
oh, there's that meeting that I really want to be a part of, or oh my gosh, that deal is huge that I have to refer out. But like, again, first things first says it's worth it. Over the course of my life, that $20,000 check, like I would rather spend less, go on less of a vacation, or do whatever the things are. From a priority list over the long term. In the short term, it's hard, and I twitch, and you know, sometimes I make mistakes and stuff like that for sure. It's not perfect. My wife will tell you I'm far from perfect, but I'm great. I think she would say that.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to bet that your Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and half of Friday are
Pretty dialed.
probably more productive than what 98% of all people in our industry
I
because
agree.
of what you're dealing with on Wednesday and then taking time for yourself on half a day Friday. So I would bet that you probably are more productive than most people anyway. And you may not be that way if you didn't take that Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it refreshes, like, we're a system, right? You got to put gas in the tank. That for me, again, for someone else, that might not be actually more time with their spouse might be like take them in the wrong direction. But for me, it fills my tank. It gets me going. It reminds me of my big why, all those things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Prioritization, that's what it's all about. Big rocks. Well, cool. So before we do the final question here, Dan, is there anything that you want to promote? How do people get in touch with you? All that good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my phone is the easiest way. Just text me 303-378-0050. If it's Wednesday, I'm not calling you back unless you're bleeding. And so that's the best way to get a hold of me. You said, I help run a real estate team that's been super successful the last few years. So if you're in that space, we don't take new agents. We don't really do luxury. We're right in the middle. So that's what we focus on. And then I help agents get licensed for lending as well, so they can do lending and real estate together. It's called Dual. I think it's a pretty cool opportunity for people to be able to help their clients in that space. So those are the big things that I do that I really enjoy. Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, and I'm a believer in Dual.
Yeah,
I'm also a member.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dan, a lot of respect for you, man. I really appreciate you being on here. So, Scott, you want to ask the final question?
Yeah, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about leadership, what would it be?
Oh man, one piece of advice.
We called it, Dan.
Yeah, 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 that's good. To be a great leader, you have to be the best version of yourself. So get focused on what that looks like.
Mm,
Like all this external stuff, and you want this, like when I was young, especially, like going to the Air Force, like I wanted to be a general. That was my thing, right? And I
mm.
was very like self-focused on like how do I get people to follow me and be seen and be heard and all that type of stuff. And I've realized as I've grown, like that's the wrong focus. That's the wrong focus for me. So if I
Love it.
get real focused on being the best version of myself and loving people well, it just attracts. So yeah, that's what I would go back and tell myself.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you being here. I mean, I feel like there's just so many nuggets that are in here, and at the end of the day, leadership really, it's actually a lot easier if we just kind of get out of our own way and we just remember that we can actually lead more by doing a little bit less, like not being everything to everybody and just being authentic, being genuine. And so, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on here and just throwing some truth bombs on us. So thank you.
Thanks, gents. Scott, it's nice meeting you. Dan,
Nice to
thanks for
meet
the
you,
invite.
Dan. It's great to have you on. Love the Nuggets today.
Yeah. And thank you to all of you who are watching. And remember, we're all leading someone in our lives, even if it's just me. So let's get out there and do the best that we can, because in the end,
Leaders got to lead.
sir.